Welcome to the November 21st, 2019 Teachers Retirement Board meeting. I'll start by calling the roll. John Adler.
I'm here.
Thomas Brown.
Here.
Natalie Green-Giles. Here. David Gavansky.
Present.
Russell Buckley.
Here.
Deborah Penny.
Here.
Susanna Vickers.
Here.
Okay, so we have a quorum. And the first item on the agenda is an update on TRS operations. Vita Palmer will work with us then.
Okay, thanks, Patricia. Members have been notified that their account statements for the third quarter of 2019 are now available. On November 1st, quarterly account statements were posted on our website for approximately 126,000 members who are currently in service or on leave. On October 29th, TDA quarterly statements were posted online for approximately 57,000 members who have deferred TDA accounts. And on October 23rd, the TDA quarterly statements for TDA beneficiary participants was mailed to a population of approximately 1,100 members. The fall 2019 issue of our member newsletter are complete and will be posted to our website next week. In-service news will then be mailed to our non-retired members, and benefit reports will be mailed to our retirees.
Thank you. Next is the Executive Director's Report. And the first item on the Executive Director's Report is the matter of the next meeting. And it has been suggested that the next regular meeting of the Teachers Retirement Board will be held on the third Thursday of the month, December 19th, 2019. Mark your calendar. The second item on the Executive Director's Report is a resolution for attendance at a conference. The following is a resolution being presented for consideration of possible adoption. Resolved that the trustees of the Teachers Retirement Board hereby approve the attendance or participation of the Executive Director and or her designees and any interested trustee at the National Council of Public Employee Retirement Systems Legislative Conference from January 26th through January 28th, 2020.
Do I have a motion to approve the attendance at the conference?
So moved.
That was in time. Jeopardy. So thank you, Mr. Adler. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Any discussion? Okay, perfect. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Motion carries.
Well, that's it for the Executive Director's Report. Next is the calendar. And the first item on the calendar is the approval of the following minutes. So it's the approval of the October 3rd, 2019 investment meeting minutes.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'm sorry, I think it's November 7th is the minutes that are in, that we were sent. That's the minutes that I have on the portal.
Okay.
Am I wrong about that? It says November 7th, and those are the
Alright.
ones that I've looked at.
So then why don't we wait?
It should be the October 3rd.
That's not the one that's on the portal. Sorry.
All right.
I'll change that. We can lay over the approval of the minutes for now, and then we can do it at the next one.
Okay.
Right.
Fine with
Sorry
that.
for that.
No, no
Sorry.
problem.
In which case you can make a vote.
Okay.
Wait,
So-
John, it's the 3rd.
On the thing, I'm looking
Yeah,
at
there's an email on the 13th of November
but the ones that
with
are
the
on
October
portal
investment meeting.
are
minutes that
November
we-
7th.
Oh, okay.
So those are the ones that I reviewed.
Those may be approved for future.
Okay.
Are you ready to approve the third, Tom? Did you look it up? to
I
the third,
honestly
or-
don't know. I don't remember.
So
Sorry.
we'll just later.
So we'll lay it over?
So why don't we lay it over? It's not
Motion to lay it
urgent,
over,
right?
or-
I apologize.
To lay it over?
But I actually just looked at this morning and read them over. So
Okay, so then we're
I
going to...
apologize.
Sorry.
All right, so we'll lay over October 3rd.
All right. So next, of course, is the items on the calendar, which you all received an electronic version of.
Please waive the reading of the calendar.
Thank you.
Do we have a motion to approve the calendar items?
So moved.
Do we have a second? Second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries.
the agenda is other business, and today we have an audit presentation from Mark Bennett.
Hi.
Hi.
So, I'm Connie Sedgwick. I'm Melissa Ward.
What?
Here,
Yeah, why
come
don't
on
you
over.
come to
Take my.
So our post-audit presentation. Yes.
What's that? Oh, now I gotta find it. Page 47.
If I do this and it goes. Our post-audit presentation is for the year ended June 30, 2019. And as you can see in the table of contents, in tab 1 you will see engagement team and firm overview. Okay. It is presented.
Yes. You can do this whole structure. Scroll down. Just do it. No. Just scroll. Right. Okay. Yeah.
So tab 2 is scope of our services. The services covered is based on the contract engagement letter with the city's contract dated July 12, 2016, which is a combining financial statement audit of TRS, and the combining statement includes QPP and TDA, and it's in accordance, the combining statements are in accordance with auditing standards generally accepted in the United States of America and the generally accepted government auditing standards, US GAGAS. The audit timeline, we provided this timeline to the management, and we're able to receive based on the dates provided here. The last date was the date of the issuance of the report, which was October 24, 2019. The presentation to the systems, Board of Trustees is today, November 21st. The next report is the CAFRA sign-off, which is going to be sometime next week in December, next month in December. The required communication with the audit committee. Professional auditing standards require us to communicate the following matters to those charged with governance. The auditor responsibility. Our audit was designed to provide reasonable, not absolute assurance that TRS's combining financial statements are presented fairly in accordance with US GAAP. Based on our audit on October 24, 2019, we issued an unmodified opinion on the combining financial statements as of and for the year ended June 30, 2019. Management signed the management representation letter that you will see in tab 2 at the end of tab 2. We have also issued an agreed upon procedure report on the securities, vault counts performed, and a report on the draft 6768 by individual employer on pension liability allocation. The management's responsibility. Management is responsible for establishing and maintaining internal controls, the design and implementation of programs and controls to prevent and detect fraud, and for informing us if there are any known or suspected fraud affecting TRS, which it would either involve management, employees who have significant roles in internal control, and other matters, and others. Management is responsible for making all financial records and related information available to us, and for the accuracy and completeness of that information. Management is responsible for designating a qualified management level individual to oversee our services, accepting responsibility for the combining financial statements and review and approve the journal entries made during the audit, and signing the management representation letter. Selection, application, or changes in significant accounting principles. As disclosed in Note 2, you will see the significant accounting policies in the Note 2 of the financial statements, combining financial statements. TRS follows US GAAP, and there were no significant changes in accounting policies to report. Significant management judgment and accounting estimates. Actually, assumptions are in Note 5 of the combining financial statements. They give us their assumptions. We have our own actuary. They go through the city's actual report, and they will give us their own review based on the assumptions that they have reviewed and report of the city's actuary. Fair value of investments in footnote 3 of the combining financial statements. We have discussed alternative investments, international investment fund. We have reviewed these judgments and estimates and concurred with management. Audit adjustments, there were no recorded or unrecorded audit adjustments. Significant issue discussed or subject to correspondence with management prior to retention, there were none. Difficulties encountered in performing the audit fraud, irregularities, or illegal acts, there were none to report. Consultation with other auditors, we are not aware of any such consultations. Material weaknesses or significant deficiencies in the internal control environment or financial reporting. Our consideration of internal control would not necessarily identify all deficiencies in internal control or financial reporting. That might be material weakness. So, given these little limitations, during our audit, we did not identify any deficiencies in TRS's internal control or financial reporting that we consider to be material weakness. And you can see our report in tab 3. We did have observations and recommendations in technology, accounting, and compliance matters, see tab 4, which we're going to go through tab 4 and go over all the different recommendations. Other independence, our firm Marks Bannett is independent with respect to TRS in accordance with AFCPA's Code of Professional Conduct. Next page, this is for the industry updates, and this is TRS's signed management representation letter that we received on October 24th, which enabled us to issue the financials. So as discussed, this is the letter which we call AUC 265. This is in regards to material weaknesses. We did not identify any material weaknesses. Tab 4 is our observation and recommendations. Current year recommendations and observations. So on financial reporting, accounting operations, during our audit, we were informed that it was brought to our attention that there was an error on interest loans to tiers 3, 4, and 6, and the interest charged to these participants on those tiers were charged 7%, we should have been 6%. The rule is that the interest rate should be 1% less than the investment rate, the management identified this error and they corrected it by an adjustment.
On the technology side, we had one new issue for this year, and that dealt with Microsoft operating system support. At this point, when we went through the audit, there were about 50 servers that were running Microsoft 2008, which is coming up to end-of-life shelf service and maintenance in January. So management is aware of that, and they are working to remedy that. And they have projected to have all these servers upgraded to current version by the end of this year. And then,
yes, and following your observations that requires further attention. I know this has been going on for the past 2 or 3 years. It's preparing a mapping schedule at year end, which is used to agree the system file balances to the financial statements. And this is only because the variable fixed investments allocations. The management is aware of that, and although the spreadsheet has been improved, it is easier to understand and follow, but we do note that there are we would suggest that that it needs some enhancement needs to be made, if possible.
And number 4 and 5, they're carried forward from last year's technology issues, which again are being remediated by management at this point. The first one deals with cyber insurance and just being able to have provision that to cover any kind of business interruption if there were a breach. That's in process right now, working with the broker. And then number 5 is around the pension management system, and just to continue the efforts around the implementation to Aspen, making sure that that stays on track from the system development standpoint.
And the last tab is the financials issue for year ended 6/30/2019. If anybody has any questions.
Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. And next on the agenda is a CEM presentation. Did you want to say anything?
So it's not by me, actually, it's by Michael Reed.
Right. Oh, Michael Reed from CEM.
Okay, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Sounds like I'm getting through the microphone, which is good. So thank you very much for having me today. It's actually my first time in New York City, and I had a bit of time to look around, so it's great to be able to take in some of New York City. Let me see. There we go. Okay. I understand most of you are fairly familiar with CEM and what we do. Just a little bit of background on me, because I know I haven't presented before. Been with CEM about 2.5 years. I'm actually filling in for somebody this year, so somebody new next year, but spent my entire 18-year career in the pension industry, first as an actuary and then in a plan sponsor role at Manulife and John Hancock before spending a bit of time with their asset management group. So kind of seen pretty much every angle of pension plans there is. So CEM has been doing pension administration benchmarking for 21 years, and I think you've been a loyal client for most of them, so thank you very much. We usually benchmark around 60 to 80 pension plans a year. For the year, this year in question, we had about 36 U.S. public retirement plan systems, just over a dozen Canadian systems, and then several from the UK and the Netherlands who were filling a slightly different survey.
Michael, could you make it a little bit bigger? It's a little hard to see. Maybe hit that plus button up there. Yeah. Okay, great. But those of us who are vision challenged, that's
Page up and
great.
down.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
If it's a page, I'll let you tap. There we go.
Okay, that makes
That's too small, John, is that
No,
right?
that's too
Does
small.
that make it worse?
No, that was better before.
It was better before. It's just like going to the
Yeah.
eye doctor. Just better. Yeah, great. Clever.
So from our overall group of participants, we choose a peer group with which to compare teachers' retirement system in New York City. The primary determinant of the peer group is membership size. When I say membership size, what we include are active members and annuitants, so those who are in receipt of a pension. when calculating the size of a pension plan, we generally, well, we don't include the number of deferred vested members. The reason for that is twofold. One is they generally don't require a lot of day-to-day activity, and also the number of deferred vested members within the different retirement plans varies greatly. So you'll see in our presentations, you're probably familiar, the predominant cost measure we use is cost per member. So if we were to include deferred vested members, that would just distort the analysis quite a bit. This is the same peer group that you had last year, and your peer group has been very stable over the past few years, which allows for very good year-over-year comparisons. So before I talk about cost and later service, I want to start off by talking about complexity, because your retirement system is a very complex retirement system. It's the second most complex in your peer group and the third most complex in our North American database. And in fact, if you look at the various complexity scores there, you'll notice that you're above peer median complexity in every area except customization choices. So your system is complex in every conceivable way, and this can obviously have a big impact on how difficult it is to run the system, particularly around you're going through a big IT modernization program, and that means you have a lot of complexity which you need to reflect in all your systems, which can greatly impact the cost and the amount of time it takes to get those systems up and running. Given that this has got a lot of viewing here, for anyone who remembers last year, you might remember your score was probably a lot higher last year, and that's because we've changed our methodology for scoring complexity this year. In previous years, it was what I'll call a relative measure, so basically what we did in each of those groups, we would look at all the systems in our database. The most complex in that area would get a score of 100, the least complex would get a score of 0, and they'd be scaled between that. Similarly, we'd add up all the scores. The most complex system on that basis would score 100, least complex 0. This year we've changed to what I'll call an absolute measure, which means the score you see is just based on your own system. We don't use the relative measure, and the reason we've changed is to make it more comparable year over year. There are an increasing number of systems who are really trying to simplify plan administration to the extent that's possible. I understand that can be very difficult. Obviously, a lot of it is codified into law, but we've had a request to make the numbers more comparable year over year. So now to talk about cost a little bit. Your cost per member, per active member in Newton for your fiscal 2018 was $251 per active member in Newton. And you'll see that is second highest in your peer group, and it's $16 per member higher than the previous year. I'll talk later on. You'll see the bulk of it is due to your IT modernization project. And I just want to say that we've seen over the past 10 years in particular, a lot of systems spending a lot of money on their IT systems, and we're finally starting to see systems realizing efficiencies, and in a lot of cases, costs even starting to come down a bit. So you're by no means an outlier in putting a lot of investment into IT, and it should, if you're like some of the other systems that are now at the back end, you should start to see some efficiencies. So it's likely a very wise investment. Okay, we'll make this just slightly bigger. So on this page, we talk about some of the reasons why you're higher or lower cost than your peers. So you can see front office FTE. So these are the FTE that you have that are dealing directly with members or employers. So you have roughly 4 extra FTE per 10,000 members than the peer average, and I'll provide some color as to why that might be in the coming slides. But as you're aware, the cost of running an administration organization is very dependent on the number of staff. A rough rule of thumb is about 60% of the total cost for systems in our database comes from FTE-related costs. So that's contributing $44 to the $134 costs over and above your peers. You also have vastly lower third-party costs. So that those are third-party costs for the front office. So that can be another reason why you have more FTEs. So you are spending a lot less on third parties. So those could be payroll outsourcing firms, consultants, and so forth. So you appear to be doing a lot more work in-house. Interestingly, you have lower costs per FTE as compared to your peer group, despite being in the highest cost area of your peer group. In fact, according to the Bureau of Labor, your area is about 48% more expensive for labor than the average of your peer group. So the fact that you are lower cost compared to your peers is actually quite remarkable in that area. I'll provide some additional details on the support costs. So these are third-party costs. You can see major projects there is $78. So over half of the additional cost is from your IT and a non-IT related project. And if you look on the right, that's what those figures would look like if you were amortizing your costs over 8 years as opposed to recognizing them as they're incurred. A little bit smaller. Okay. So I said that I would provide a little bit more color around why you might have more front office FT. So one reason is workload. So this is how much work you're doing for your members. So we calculate on a cost-weighted basis, and you can see, particularly within purchases and transfers in, you are doing about 10 times the amount of work of your peers, and that's creating the bulk of the additional cost in that area. And this isn't something that you can necessarily control. It's a function of how your plan is. Similarly, you are fielding more calls and emails than your peers, as well as providing quite a bit more one-on-one counseling, which I'm sure your members appreciate. Counteracting this slightly is the fact that you also have the second highest productivity. So your front office FT is doing more work on a weighted basis than that of your peers. A big part of this is while you're doing a lot of purchases and transfers in, you're also doing them very efficiently, which is good news. It's not uncommon to see that when a retirement system has a certain area where they have a lot of a certain transaction, they're very good at doing it, but you're actually exceptionally good at processing them in a cost-effective manner, and that is decreasing your FTE-related cost by $15 per member. So with respect to back office activities, I talked about the major projects, governance and financial control. That is board support, so support for this meeting, as well as financial control, audit, and so forth. Internal audit is slightly higher than peers. With respect to IT, you'll notice you're slightly higher. So those are for your existing systems, as well as the strategy to develop them. On that, just to note, it is your strategy and development that's slightly high cost. Your actual cost of the phone and computer systems is right in line with your peers. With respect to the last item, actuarial, legal, audit, and other, it's other support services, which are higher. Your actuarial, legal, and audit costs are all either in line or lower than those of your peers. I'll pause now if there are any questions on cost, because I'm going to move on to service. Okay, seeing none, I will move on to service. So the first thing I want to do is just to reiterate what our service score is and what it is not. Our service score is based on what we feel members would want. Cost irrelevant. So what the members want, while they want things now, they want them through every channel, and they don't like red tape. So that's a general rule. We would never encourage any of our systems to aim for a score of 100. It would be cost prohibitive. I also recommend systems not to concentrate on the actual overall score, because everything we do at SIA, what we get the most pushback on from our clients are the weighting, because different things are more important to different systems. So I would encourage May members to look at the areas which are important to them and see how you score in those areas as opposed to concentrating on the overall number. We don't change the scoring metrics often, but we did do that this year, so I'll quickly cover what the changes are. You'll notice 1A, pension payments. That is essentially mission critical for pension plans, definitely the most important thing, which is, do you pay your members on time every month? Previously, that had a weighting of 20% to reflect that. Everybody is doing it on time. So we wanted to adjust some of the other scores, particularly to give more weighting to websites. So we took it from there and we put it into websites. Previously, the website weighting was 11.3% as compared to a call center of 21%. That was definitely appropriate 10 years ago. Over the last 5 years in particular, we have seen website usage increase pretty much exponentially. And we've also finally started to see among a lot of our clients call center volumes coming down. So we wanted to reflect that in our scores because it's apparent to us that members really do value having a good website. Some very other small changes with member presentations. Previously, we used to use average size, so the number of members that were attending the average presentation as a metric, but increasingly plans are using webcasts where that is not relevant, so we removed that metric, and there are a couple of other small tweaks. All that being said, you are slightly lower, you can see, than the peer median and peer average. Your score did drop slightly this year. That was due to your call center, which had slightly higher wait times as well as higher undesired outcomes than it did last year. But truth be told, the biggest difference, if you look at your call center score versus that of your peers, is that you don't offer real-time estimates to members. And that can be a choice or a technological advantage or disadvantage depending on the system. With respect to websites, I'll just speak briefly on that. That is largely a capability thing. You have, we rank, the biggest things are, being able to do retirement estimates, and then there's a laundry list of 18 other transactions which go into the score. You are doing slightly fewer than your peers, but where you're not doing them, in most cases, it's where your peers aren't doing them, where the majority of your peers aren't doing them either. So they're doing more of them, but different ones. Here's a little bit of a flavor, and the one thing I do want to point out is pension inceptions, where you incept 99% of your retirees within a month of them leaving service, which is one of the highest in our database, and I'm sure is very much appreciated by your retirees that they're able to go from working to receiving a pension without any break. I think that that's something to be really proud of. I'd also spoken about the one-on-one counseling. You can see you're doing more than double the amount of counseling and one-on-one presentations that your peers are, which I'm sure your membership appreciates, and being in such a big city can help that because travel, as everyone is, pretty close. With respect to the website, so you can see your website score has actually come up this year. You now offer 12 out of the 18 tools, whereas your peer average is 14. I spoke briefly on the call center. You can see there's your wait time and your undesired outcomes. Increase 9% is your peer average. You were quite a bit better than peers in 2017. So this is just to give you a flavor of the impact of certain improvements. We are definitely not necessarily recommending these. That is something that you need to decide on a cost-benefit analysis, but some of these are some of the bigger numbers. So for example, your wait time of 255 seconds For a perfect score, you need 60 seconds or less. That would increase your score on that metric alone by almost 4. Similarly, you have five menu layers, and our scoring metric is 1 or fewer. For a perfect score, that would be 2.1. And then I had mentioned, or then survey satisfaction surveying. We really believe that it's important to actually survey your members to see how satisfied they are. You're doing it in some areas, but not in all. And truth be told, I don't think there's anyone doing it in all areas. But if you were to do it all, that would improve your score by 2.7. So here you can see your score versus that of peers over the last 4 years. You would increase it quite a bit from 2015 to 2017. And like I said, slipped slightly backwards in 2018, but still a bigger increase than what we saw of your peers. And that's pretty typical of any sort of a peer group. We're seeing very incremental changes at this point. Generally, a few additional tools on the website, usually around banking information or other kind of potentially high-risk issues that some systems are now coming to get to grips with the security issues around. So I was told I had 15 minutes. I think I took about 18, but I'm probably going to get me out of here on time. So I don't know if there are any other questions. I hope that was clear.
Guess not. Thank you, Michael. That was a great presentation. And thank you, TRS, for the great work that you do.
Thank you.
We get a copy of the deck?
Yes. Well, next on the agenda is questions and comments from the public. Seeing none. Deborah?
Okay. Okay, so, anything else? Then do I have a motion? Oh, I think you were starting to say something.
Oh, me? Oh, no.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Vickers. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned.